Let's just dive right in. There's this huge debate happening right now, and you've definitely heard one side of it, probably loud and clear, that this whole AI boom is just another speculative bubble and it's gonna pop. But is that the whole story? We're gonna break down why that might be the completely wrong way to look at it.
All right, so first things first. Let's tackle what seems to be the popular opinion. You know, if you spend any time online, you've seen this argument that this is all just a bunch of hype.
Hop on X, scroll through LinkedIn. It is absolutely everywhere. The conversation is just filled with comparisons to the dot-com bust. Some people are even throwing around terms like the 17th century tulip craze. And you hear all the same old hits, right? People point to these massively inflated stock prices, a huge fear of missing out, or FOMO. They argue there's not enough real-world use for it, just yet. It all builds this story that everyone's just buying in, hoping they can sell to some greater fool down the line. That's the bubble story.
Okay, but this is where that whole narrative really starts to fall apart. The first huge difference between now and something like the dot-com era, it comes down to one simple thing: actual, real money. Let's just look at the numbers for a second. Back at the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble, you had companies valued at over 100 times their earnings, based on what? Eyeballs and vague promises of future profits? Today, the AI giants have a price-to-earnings ratio of around 30. Now that's high for sure, but it's not based on fantasy. It's built on massive, existing cash flow.
And just how massive are we talking? Well, giants like Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Amazon, together they generated over $300 billion in operating cash flow just last year. This is not speculative vaporware. This is a calculated business investment from some of the most profitable companies in human history.
The second key difference is the nature of the demand itself. This is not a case of if you build it, they will come. It's exactly the opposite.
The dot-com era was a classic supply push. Companies spent billions laying down fiber optic cables, basically assuming that traffic would eventually show up. And it did, yeah, but it took years, and a lot of companies went bankrupt just waiting for it.
Today, we are in a demand-pull world. The simple reality is the world wants more AI than we can possibly produce right now. Companies like Google and Microsoft are literally having to turn away high-end compute customers because they just don't have the capacity.
I mean, just look at the supply chain. The high-end GPUs, the giant networked clusters you need to run them, even the special high-bandwidth memory, it's all sold out, sometimes for years in advance. The market signal isn't for sale, it's sold out, and that is the sign of overwhelming real-world demand.
So you might be thinking, okay, if it's not a bubble, why doesn't it feel like we're in a massive productivity boom yet? Well, it turns out this whole pattern is actually very familiar to historians and economists. An economist named Carlota Perez actually laid out this two-phase model. First, you get the installation phase. This is a period of massive investment, huge infrastructure build-out, and yeah, it often looks and feels like a bubble. But then, and only then, do you get to the deployment phase, where that new tech is widely adopted and you see a golden age of productivity. Right now, we are squarely in that installation phase.
And this is nothing new. Back in 1987, the economist Robert Solow said this famous line about computers. Everyone could see that PCs were changing the world, but the economic data hadn't caught up yet. It takes time to retrain people, to redesign how we work, and to really integrate a powerful new technology. That time lag, that's known as the Solow Paradox.
But here's the crucial part to understand. While this productivity lag, this J-curve, has happened with every single major technology, the cycle is getting dramatically shorter. For AI, because it's basically riding on top of decades of internet and cloud infrastructure, the lag is expected to be just a few years, not a few decades.
So, this brings us to the real risk. If the AI market isn't a speculative bubble that's just waiting to collapse, what's the actual danger? Well, the answer comes from understanding what kind of asset we're even talking about. A classic bubble is built on what's called a zero-yield asset. Think about those tulip bulbs. Their value was purely speculative. A tulip bulb doesn't do anything. It doesn't generate income. You only made money if a greater fool came along and paid more for it than you did.
An NVIDIA H100 GPU is the polar opposite. It is a productive capital asset. A single one of these GPUs can generate around $13,000 in revenue a year. That means it pays for itself in just over 2 years. It's not a tulip, it's industrial equipment, like a factory machine or a commercial truck.
So, the real risk here isn't that these GPUs become worthless like tulips did. The risk is something called creative destruction. The pace of innovation is just so ridiculously fast that the brand new chip you buy today might be economically uncompetitive in just 2 years because something twice as good comes out. That's a challenge of obsolescence, not a speculative collapse.
Okay, let's pull all this together. Let's look at the two competing ways to see this whole thing, side by side.
So you really have two completely different stories. On one side, there's the bubble narrative. It's all driven by speculation and mania. The core asset is a zero-yield tulip, and the biggest risk is that the next buyer just disappears. But on the other side, you have the Industrial Revolution framework. The driver is real technology, the assets are productive capital like GPUs, the demand is real and unmet, and the key risks are about valuation and the rapid pace of innovation.
When you look at the actual evidence, the real profits, the insane demand, the historical patterns, the picture becomes a lot clearer. So maybe the question we should be asking isn't if the bubble will pop, but how we all navigate the rapid, chaotic, and revolutionary construction of a new technological age that's happening right now in front of our eyes.